Hello to all our viewers and welcome to yet another edition of Showtime. It's that time of the week again to highlight the journey, efforts and achievements of people and communities from Northeast India and beyond. I'm Aaron Lyngdoh. It's time to meet my guests. From the man who's ever ready to explore and thrive to break life's preset boundaries, to an independent Naga visual artist who intends to tell her stories through photography, and the Shillong-based folk fusion outfit whose energy rides on the indigenous music seated on the laps of the Khasi hills. My first guest this episode is a self-taught man behind the lens. He's had facets pertaining to direction, screenplay, storyboard and art direction. Well, his strengths lie in his anthropocentric approach to storytelling and tackling complex issues of the self and its relation to the world. The very talented Anubhav Deka. Anubhav, welcome to Showtime.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on here.
Brilliant. So let me cut straight to my first question. Photography happened to you at a very young age, and of course your website also mentioned that you're inspired by family albums. That's very intriguing to me. Give us context.
So to start off, it's a bit weird in some ways, but also I think it's kind of endearing to me at least. So it's up to the viewer to understand that. Photography started for me not in the way as a profession or anything else. I kind of just saw my father taking photos here and there, and if I search hard enough, I'll still find like proper, for reels and stuff of basically of the 90s, 80s and stuff. Right. And as far as I've understood, photography has been running through our family. So I have inherited a few cameras as well from my uncles and stuff, which have like history to them because they have seen through the many facets of history Assam has gone through, and it has always stayed there by my side, but I never really quite picked up on it as a profession. Certain changes happens and suddenly you realize that okay, this is something that gives me joy, and this joy is something I don't find anywhere else. So at that point, and also because of a very strong background or like a support system, I was able to make a switch to photography, because at first I wasn't into photography as a profession. I used to take photos and stuff for hobbyist reasons, but suddenly it kind of felt this is only natural that I should do something that gives me this much amount of joy, because you just have one life to get to to experience this kind of joy. So yeah.
And as a photographer, what's your approach to storytelling?
This is more or less a give and take situation, because even if it's my approach, usually I find myself telling stories from somebody else's life. So
their point of view.
Yeah. So even if it's my approach would be like, how easily can I step into their shoes, or how easily can I see their own stories through my own eyes. Of course, there is a bit of overlap, because it has to overlap so I can relate to it. And honestly, it's just becoming like invisible and disappear through the story itself. That is one part of it. The other part would be how to tell a story in a more naturalistic way, because usually in my own experience I found very hyper edited and hyper curated points of view, which kind of doesn't show the entire story. And my approach is basically, if I feel it in a way but I see there is other facets to it, how can I bring those facets even if I'm feeling it about it in a certain way. So as far as I am concerned, I would like my approach, if I would term my approach, I would like to term it as like as wide as possible, to bring as many facets into the limelight as possible, which again it's kind of non-sustainable sometimes. So you have to know when to cut corners, but even then you just know when to draw the boundaries if you are deeply into the story itself.
So as a photographer, what makes a good photograph?
Oh. Okay, this is a very subjective question, I feel. And for me, I find myself drawn to photographs that are not strictly photos. Like they can be snapshots of like digital art or something. And more or less it kind of comes back to storytelling in and of itself. If I see an image and I see like a more or less complete narrative, or it gives me a gateway point into understanding where this photograph is coming from, why has it been taken, who is this person who is being photographed, or not even a person, let's say an animal, or like a place, or like a literal slice of time, right? And I think it's less of technicalities and more of like what is being encased or enshrined in that small square that we call as a photograph. And I think that's what makes a good photograph.
So Anubhav, let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that have captured your heart and changed you as a person and as a creator.
More or less, I kind of view like my own projects as small turning or milestones in my own life. And despite not talking about client projects, just for personal projects in and of itself, I view like almost every single one of them that I have created or gone through or like experienced the process of writing it down, processing it, viewing it, visualizing it, scouting, like the whole entire 9 yards. It's every single one of them has changed me in a small bit. There has been a few projects with the queer community, and I have seen, or I don't want to use the word seen, I have been grateful to be given access to parts of narratives that I wouldn't normally be a part of, and that has been a major contributing factor in all of my future work. Like now, even before I have to think about conceptualizing a thing or like a project or something, I catch myself completely thinking about inclusivity in and of itself. Like that has come as a second nature to me, just because I have been given the access to the narratives firsthand. And in the same way, I think a lot of the things that I kind of come up with in my own personal time is more about introspecting and less about from the outside world, although there is this give and take between the outside world and your own inner world, inner self, because if the other doesn't exist, this would not exist, right? So for me, every single one of these projects represent like a small chapter in my life, because it kind of represents a small bookmark that I can like keep in, I can visit, and then I can relearn from a different perspective. And I think it's just kind of making like how a tree grows, right? Like you just the tree makes rings around its bark, and it keeps on growing wider and wider and wider and wider and taller and taller. Exactly. So it's kind of like just building on previous experiences so that I can learn more or like understand more and then give back more. That's the end goal, to give back more. That's the whole problem.
So you dabble into films as well, and in particular, That Which Has No Clue is your baby. What is it all about?
It will take a bit of context as well for this, because That Which Has No Clue is a poem by Rumi, one of my favorite poets, and it kind of kicked off because a friend of mine gave me this small book of assorted Rumi poems, and till then I have just read a few and I didn't go through their work properly. So once I was flipping through the whole book, this poem kind of caught my eye, and I sat on it for almost 5 months. I got the gift in January, and till June or July I kind of just sat on it, and I was like thinking about it, and suddenly it kind of started clicking into place. Like the whole poem is about losing something. It can be a loved one, it can be loss of faith, it can be anything it's a poem about loss.
Interesting.
But in the same way, it's not a grief. It's like you lose something because they have outlived their or its time in your life. So a loss isn't necessarily a negative connotation. A loss can mean a beginning for a new chapter in your life. True. And I believe in that moniker a lot. Like that is something I live and die by. And the whole poem kind of touches upon the repetition of loss and building and loss and building, because you can only build when there is nothing to be built on, like when there is a clear plot of land, or like when you know that it's a stable ground, and for it to be a stable ground, it has to go through a lot of things. It has to go through erosion, through weather fluctuation, so it'll experience lifetimes of change before you are even there. So that poem kind of just made me introspect that everything I've learned is through in a way loss, because there is this loss of ego and this loss of personality, or like this loss of preconceived boundaries, coming back to that thing.
Yes.
And you build on top of it. You're like, oh, this is where I'm wrong, this is where I can learn more. And that whole poem, kind of the visuals as well, work with the same way as well. There are two people who are very similar in looks and stuff, but one of them is filmed during the daytime, and one of them is filmed during the nighttime. And usually in most narratives, you see the nighttime as a time of loneliness, of despair or something, but it's not supposed to be like that. Most of us can agree, if we are night owls, that nights are the only places where we can like properly think through, and days when we can execute. So it kind of mirrors it. So the nighttime of the whole filmography is like, the nighttime of the whole film is basically you or the person understanding themselves a bit more, coming to realizations, and in the daytime they are running towards a goal, which again leads them back to the nighttime self, because once they reach the goal, the cycle continues again.
If you were to advise someone who wants to take up photography as a career, what would that advice be?
I think a lot of the people who are photographing here, they are following their own passions and they are following their own creative direction as well, which I think is a good thing, because a lot of the newer people would be quickly swept away in trends or in hypes or in fashion fads or something. But once you kind of hone down what you see and what you work on and what you think your principles are, the trends would come and go, but your vision would obviously stay the same despite being influenced by trends. So yeah, I think that is like what I would tell a newer person or a person who's just starting photography or filmmaking, that just go out and get it done. And the more you get it done, the more you would know what you would want to do. So it just practice, like the lesson isn't the practice itself. You don't have to reach for lessons first and then implement them into your practice.
And finally, what's in the pipeline?
Oh, funny question. So there is a few projects here and there. I've been focusing mostly on photographs right now and less of filmmaking. And hopefully they see the light of the day, because I have been known to be a bit slow in photographs, because it comes from a very introspective place. So it kind of also takes some time to get it out there. And a few photographs, a few films, hopefully, let's see, a few music videos probably. The summer seems a lot of work, but a lot of busy being around, but it's also a good feeling when everything is kind of picking back up again, because it always feels nice to be in and around your people, working on something, creating something. So yeah, a lot of things, a few films, a few photo projects as well as a few like kind of narratives from the queer community as well.
True. Because
June month is coming right up along, and yeah, that's more or less it for the summer of 2022.
Summer of 2022.
Yeah.
Anubhav, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
It's been
you.
a great time.
Anubhav Deka firmly believes that the next form of media is at the point where the cinemas meet interactive media. A thought. Anubhav Deka, thank you for having me over. Time now for a very short break. I will return with an independent Naga visual artist whose craft is a manifestation of sublime artistry. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, viewers. My next guest on the show hails from Nagaland and is based out of New Delhi. Well, she began photography out of curiosity while pursuing her degree in marketing and finance. I've had the privilege to witness her in action while at work, and what a joy to have her on board. Please say hello to the lovely Menti Jamir. Correct me if I'm wrong, Menti. Your photography journey started way back in 2014. What all can you recall about those initial days?
So I think earlier when back at home, when I was in Nagaland in the Northeast, I was not exposed to photography or art, any kind of artwork. So after that, after I came to Delhi, I came here to study masters here. I went to a business school actually. So after that, when I was doing my master's, there was someone I know, a friend that he wanted to be a photographer. So while trying to help hone his skills and just trying to help him research and what all he can do with the camera, with the tripod, and with the lighting and everything. So in that process, I got hooked into photography. So that's how I started. And like, yeah, here I am after that.
Fast forward to today, how have you matured as a photographer over the years?
Uh, I think visually, I've explored so much over photography in terms like I have no prior. I didn't go to an art school, and I wasn't exposed much to photography apart from films that we used to watch at home and like all of that. But apart from that, I didn't have much exposure. So I think whatever I'm learning and whatever I'm doing, it's everything is an experience and everything is a learning for me since I'm self-taught. So after coming here and after getting so much involved with photography, I'm just amazed at how big photography can be. There are so many things to explore within photography itself. Because back at home, I feel like when we think or when we discuss about photography, it's always about maybe a little bit of portraiture and say weddings. That's how one does commercially to make a living. But then there are so many ways to do photography. Like there is documentary photography, there is fashion, there is fine arts, there is corporate photography. There are like and then after that there are layers to it where you can make books, you can make exhibitions out of all the images out of your archive that you have. So exploring all of that after coming here has been amazing for me. The journey has been really good so far.
Give us an insight into the collectives you've been part of or probably are still part of.
Yeah. So I am part of two women collectives in India. So both were born during the pandemic, actually, because I felt like we all came together with a sense of solidarity, and we all were missing a human sense of human touch and being connected to the outside world. So both the collectives that I am part of, like it came from during the pandemic, we all came together to just to connect. And maybe in that process, we also, since we're all photographers, we also decided to share work and stay connected and make work together. So I'm part of this collective called E30. So there are nine of us and nine women photographers from across India. And we came together during the pandemic, and we are now in the process of making a book together. So, which is, yeah, which has been amazing. Like, more than, I feel like more than the book and all the work that we discuss, there is so much of like sisterhood and friendship that's happening, and it's such a support system for us to be able to discuss your work or your personal work or your personal life or anything that you're going through in life. You can just discuss with them, and that has been a big relief and support system for us together. And I'm also part of ama collective, which is from the northeast region. we all came together again during the pandemic, and then we met even once. Like I couldn't go, but then they all met in Guwahati last year. And then there, yeah, we've been talking like almost every month, discussing work, what to do with the collective, you know. And also there are not a lot of like photographers, especially women, in the documentary and art circle that are actively doing pursuing the art form. So we are all here to like tell our own stories, because for the longest time people have been coming to the Northeast and then telling our stories.
And you know, Menti, we all talk about inspiration in art, etc., etc. How to be inspired by other artists without replicating their style?
I think for that, I think you will all have to be true to ourselves, you know. It's very easy to get swayed and then to get just, because I feel like these days everything is so fast and everything is created and then put out so quickly, and you are exposed to so many things, so many images, so many creativity around. The only way to get through that, or is to like stay true to yourselves and also find inspiration in other things. Like say, I find a lot of inspiration around nature and also around my childhood. Sometimes we as artists, we if we really like someone's work, we tend to like idolizing them and worshiping them in some way, you know. Maybe in that process we also get lost. I feel like our work has to be firstly rooted in who we are and where we are from, and to also find inspiration elsewhere and not just in someone else's work, because I feel like there's inspiration all over around us.
Now, what is your style of photography?
I'm still yet to discover my style, but also I don't want to discover my style, because I feel like once you have a style, then somehow you are known for that style, and somehow that style restricts you. And I want to keep evolving. Like every time I do something, I want to do something new and not make my work restrict to a style that I'm doing. And I am very scared of that I'll be restricted to a certain thing and I'll stop evolving as a photographer, as an artist.
Now, you know, the pursuit for perfection is everywhere, and I'm sure it is with photography as well. How do you reckon one get there?
I know it's a very difficult it's a very difficult question, because I've been there, and I also don't know how I did it. But I think for me, being in the city helped. But I also feel like, and I also see that because of internet and because of the digital age that we are in, it's much easier to put your work out there, you know. Earlier, people would have to go to agencies, get hard copies of their work, and then meet people offline, and then, you know, like it was more for the more privileged. But now, because of the internet, I feel like everyone can put their work out, and you know, everyone can pursue whatever they want to, because you don't need anyone to put your work out there. You just need yourself. You just need to create and put your work out there. But also, I know freelancing and doing this full time can be quite daunting, especially if you are home, you know, if you are back in the Northeast, because I understand that we don't have a lot of avenues to get other commercial work apart from weddings. There are so many other ways to doing photography, like pursuing personal projects, doing documentary projects, and working with other organizations who are hiring photographers to do documentary work. like NGOs are there, other organization, like say every organization needs a photographer somehow to document their work. And maybe even if it's government government as well, like at the end of the day, at the end of the year, when you submit a report, you need something apart from writing in tangible form or in digital form to show what you have done maybe. And for that you need a photographer, you know. Somehow a lot of brands in the Northeast, I feel like they don't want to invest in branding, they don't want to invest in good images, and you know, they feel like, oh, we'll just do with it. But you come and then you see that it's not it, you know. You, if you're making something, if you're building something for the long run, your brand image is everything. And the sooner we realize that, I think the easier it will get, you know. Because if you invest early on, then it will be easier, or it will be better for you, so that you'll have a language earlier on. If full time is not possible, freelancing full time is not possible, then one can always get a job as well. Why not? I know a lot of people here who has a full time job and who also does photography as a hobby on the side, and you know, and who does design and photography as well. And there is no strict rule that you have to do freelancing, or you know, you'll have to, this has to be your source of income. It's nothing like that.
And finally, what makes a good picture?
um I think, of course, composition and understanding your surrounding is important, but I also feel like it's very subjective. A good picture to me might not be a good picture to you, and it's very subjective. And for me, I feel like what I'm really drawn to images, it's in photography, is that the emotional aspect of it. Like, we can all create images, like just like, you know, we can create, as you said, perfect images, like in terms of lighting, in terms of composition. But if the images, if that image doesn't make us feel anything, then I don't I don't think I see any point or any see value in that, you know. For me, I feel like making someone feel something about what you create, about the stories that you tell. For me, that is more important.
Now, Menti's photographic process stayed with her as a tender reminder of who she is. Menti works on long-term personal projects besides being part of emerging women collectives in India. Menti Jamir, what a pleasure. We will take another short break here. Up next is a Shillong-based multi-genre band that's produced timeless music and songs which contain wit, humor, and are solution-oriented. Stay right there. Welcome back, viewers. My next guest is the Shillong-based band known to have crisscrossed genres. Their songs, both in English and Khasi, contain wit, humor, and are solution-oriented. Lo and behold, Somersault. Kit Shangplyang, let me begin with you. The band prides itself as Meghalaya's folk fusion band. Explain folk fusion for us, please.
So yes, folk fusion, the word itself starts with folk because the band was so influenced, and all the members of the band, in fact, had some roots in, Khasi music. So when we, put all of this together, and just to stick to, the purest and the pure folk music, in this day and age, it's a bit challenging to catch the attention, especially of the young generation. So that's why we've, intentionally kept fusion there. So, of course, the music of Somersault really, is the one that sits restless on the laps of the Khasi Hills. So, in a way, it represents the heritage, the culture, and the music of the place. But also, it represents the culture of the hill people, you know. So, whether it is in the Khasi Hills or the Jaintia Hills or the other hills in India. So, whenever we have a chance to go outside, like last time we had gone outside the country. So this is what we tell people: the folk fusion of somersault, the folk fusion music of somersault, is the one that comes out from the hills of India.
So, how has the response been so far?
So, when we started Somersault in, like 15 years ago, so we wanted to do the music that comes from the heart, and the music that, comes from the Khasi Hills. And there were people who really critiqued. They said, this is not going to work. But it took some time for that kind of response to come in. And I think we never planned it to be hyper local. We never planned it to touch the life of so many people, right from the young ones who sing our songs to the older and elderly people who also hum our songs. So I think the response of our when we started 15 years ago, the first 10 years was sort of very lukewarm. But then we should also say that the movement the world over to get back to their roots, I think, sort of help the music of somersault, and people realize the value of their identity and their culture. So that's where we struck the chord, and then we connected with our audience. And now I think a lot of people, because of the music that we have sort of adopted, which is the people's music. So a lot of people connected with the music of somersault.
Now, let me go to Gregory. Gregory, talk to us a little bit about your new album, Clear, and how different is it from the first album?
Yeah, the first album was, for any band, a debut album is always something. It's a very introductory kind of an album. I think a lot of people really didn't know what we had in store, really didn't know what our music was all about. So when we did put out those songs, I think what we didn't expect was how huge that album would go on to become. Some of the songs there now amounting to like 3-4 million views. It's quite crazy. We never thought that that kind of traction would come in. And then I remember the gigs started coming in. And so, fast forward to where we are now in 2022 and having Clear come out, I think Clear has become an album which is sort of taken that even further, taken our music even further, our identity even further, and what Somersault is all about. And I think there's been a lot of changes, obviously, in the band lined up, and there's been a lot of changes in how we write our songs, and a lot of changes in how just the totality of the music. And bringing that in this album is something that we are very, very excited about. So there's already 2 songs out. The first single we put out with a music video, that song's called Mlo. Mlo is literally translated into salt, and it's a very fun video if you watch it. And then we have a second song, Captivate Me, that's come out from this. So those are the 2 singles out for this particular phase now, and then we'll be going into the next phase where we'll be putting out more music and eventually put out the album next year.
Now, what sets Somersault apart from other bands we know of in the Northeast?
I would say it's how strong we stick to our identity and how strong we stick to our roots. I think a lot of bands, like what Kit mentioned earlier, in the past 5-6 years, there's been a lot of a resurgence in roots movement, and a lot of people have been going back into their tribal identities to sort of understand where they come from. And I think that lack of identity, that we faced through in the early 2000s and sort of through that era, coming into now, like we've sort of really gotten to know our roots back again. And I think that's what sets us apart, is that we didn't try to do this on purpose. We never tried to do this on purpose at all. And you see a lot of the bands that come out from the Northeast or from India or from any part of the world that are trying to do this, they're sort of trying to do it purposely, right? I think what sets Somersault apart is that we didn't try to do this on purpose at all. Like when we started out, we had the vision about 10 years back, to do something like this without having the whole roots resurgence or the whole tribal identity resurgence. And I think that's what sets us apart from everyone. Is this is very organic. It's not something that we're trying to force. It's not something that we're trying to try so hard. It just comes to us. It's just who we are, and I mean, you can hear that. You can hear it in the music, and the music never lies. The music never lies.
Going back to you, Kid, last November, the band traveled to 3 countries in Europe. Give us the lowdown, please.
So yes, Aaron, I think it was 2 countries, not three. We intended to do three, but because of COVID challenges, I think we were able to do only two. That is Germany and Denmark. I think for us, when we talk to our sponsors, we always tell them that this is not a bunch of musicians or singers going there and sing a song and come back. Of course, we did about 7 or 8 events in Germany and Denmark, and for us, it was a storytelling exercise. So it was an opportunity for us, to tell the stories of the Khasi Hills and tell the stories of the hills of India to the world. So what also is interesting is that we were able to use, the traditional rain shield or the traditional umbrella of the Khasi people, which is the knup, and use that as a musical instrument. Then we got to talk about the other rain shield of other places like the Nonla of the Vietnamese people, and you have the Japi of the Assamese people. But the difference is that the Knup is much stronger and much wider. So therefore, we got a chance to talk about the rainiest places on earth, which is Mausan Ram and Sora and the entire cluster. And how a farmer, when he uses the club, and he enjoys that kind of security. So I think for Somersault, yes, it is music, but it is also a lot about communicating our identity and our culture, and this is what interests the people from outside. And so on one hand, we are hyper local, and on the other hand, we are global and universal. So I think to also add to what Greg had said about what set us apart from other bands is the fact that our frequencies from hyper local to global is something which sort of converges into our identity, which is very cultural and very spiritual as well.
Roommate sessions was so much fun. Tell our viewers, what is roommate sessions, and more importantly, when do you plan to revive it?
Yeah, roommate sessions was something that happened during COVID. So we've got fans who said, we've been missing your songs, your album is not out yet, and what's happening? So as a way to sort of respond to the fear, if you remember, during COVID, and the kind of restlessness, and we thought as a band, we could be of use and we could add value to entertain, and then entertain people with a purpose. So that's how roommate sessions started, and then we started separately in our homes, and then we record all of those songs, and some of those songs are not Somersault songs, but songs of others. And then we also did one session with Desmond Sun, who was another very popular Khasi artist here in Shillong. So and his song sort of topped the chart because it was a very, very popular song, and we had so much fun. And I think it's very encouraging to us to know that the fans and our followers really was blessed by those songs. So I think roommate sessions is not something that we plan to do in the future, and but God forbid if there is a situation like COVID, perhaps music and life itself will probably lead us to do that. But I think there's no specific plan to come up with another version of roommate sessions.
This question is for you, Greg. How do you perceive the music scene in the Northeast?
The Northeast the Northeast scene has boomed quite a lot. I think it has a lot to do with some of the bands that came out in the early 2000s up till 2010, 2012. A lot of the bands, Soulmate, obviously from Shillong, Lu Majao has always been a staple here. And then you look to places like Assam, you've got Papon, Zubin Garg. These guys have always been at it. And each and every single state, there's Alobo Naga from Nagaland, That's Your Sisters from Nagaland. And then when you go Arunachal Pradesh, there's an artist called Tabachake, there's an artist called Chorun Mugli. I mean, I could go on and name a lot of artists who started this boom in Northeast independent music, and I think the scene is very much thriving right now. Also, partly due to the availability of a lot of venues. You wouldn't see a lot of venues back in the day. Back in 90s or early 2000s, you'd probably have one venue in the entire Northeast, and now you can actually do like an 8-city tour or something like that. So you can do about 8 shows, 8 different venues, 8 different states. And bands from Sikkim are coming here, bands from Manipur, bands from Mizoram, they're coming to Shillong. Bands from Shillong are going out, and there's this close knit. Obviously, there's always been a close knit neighborhood kind of a thing, between all Northeast states, and I think that adds to it also. Like we feel at home and we feel safe to travel in the Northeast. And there's been a lot of discussions among a lot of bands from the Northeast in terms of creating like a very sustainable touring circuit for musicians in the Northeast. And I would say in about 2 to 3 years we'd be there. So I think it's thriving a lot because there's a lot of artists also putting out music almost every single month now. And just the amount of music itself and the amount of shows that are happening and the amount of live venues that are there, I would say that Northeast music scene is very much thriving right now. And in about 3 to 4 years, you could see a lot of investment probably in the Northeast music scene.
And Kid, let me hear it from you. Can we look at music as a serious career option, or will it take some time for the region to catch up?
Well, I think we can, but to be very, very practical, I think as it is now, it is still a small window for professionals, music professionals, to really come in and sustain themselves. So there has to be more planning, more strategy, corporate support, government support, community support, and so we have to take, for example, in Shillong, I think this whole music career to from a hobby level, and to how to monetize that and turn that into a profession and a livelihood, with a purpose. So I think the entire community. I'm not just talking about the music community, but I'm talking about the local communities, whether they are uncles or fathers, community leaders, religious leaders, government leaders. I think there has to be and understand that music and arts and culture, therefore identity of the people, have so much value to really shape the way we are, and to look at the future of the villages, to look at the future of our towns and our states in such a way, and I'd really like that to happen. And I think uh, the musicians and artists also have to come together and mean business what they do, and push it to a different level. I mean, challenges will always be there, but I think we got to be solution oriented, and then listen to the call and work on the call.
Gregory, what's the dream with Somersault?
No, to keep making music as much as we can. I feel like we're not even halfway there with what we're capable of in terms of the potential and the songwriting capabilities that we have. And I think the dream is to just keep doing more shows. I think we just want to be touring world tours and stuff like that. We did a small little tour like we've spoken about earlier with the small little European kind of tour, and it'll be great to keep doing 3 or 4 of those every year, or to have a even longer, be out of our I mean, I know it's difficult for some of us, but if that could be a possibility where we'd go in for like 40 dates or 50 dates, like a proper world tour, come back and grow our audience. I think that's the only thing that we are trying to work towards to is to grow our audience globally. And we know that this in the past we've seen bhangra music, or we've seen like Carnatic music uh, being very huge. You've got artists like Arijit Singh who are selling out tours in America, and you've got people. Pratik Kuhad is selling out shows in America, and if there's a space for Hindi music there, I think definitely our music from the Northeast could definitely find a place in a global community, and that's the dream, is to just keep pushing the boundaries further and further with our music, and at the same time growing our audience and playing more shows. Just playing more music, that's the dream.
And finally, Kit Shangpliang, what's in the pipeline? Are we expecting a new album anytime soon?
Well, the release of the second album, which is the new album, is actually underway, because there are 11 songs in the album, and we've released two songs. That is Low, and the other one is the English song called "Captivate Me," talked about Shillong. So there will be more that we will be releasing soon, and there's another one which I can't really disclose now. And so the release of 11 songs, one after the other over a period of 15 to 30 days, is basically we want to really catch the attention and sustain the attention of people. And the fact of the matter is, if you release all 11 songs at one go, so all of those 11 songs will just get lost in the album. So we wanted to be, strategic in that sense. And then, because now you're talking about social media and social media content, and you're talking about opportunities to talk about each song, because we've given so much love, so much effort, so much money to produce each song. And there's so much message into the song, there's so much identity, there's so much culture. So I think it is important for our listeners, and our viewers to actually digest each and every word and each and every note of the song, because when you have 11 songs in an album, it's like you have 11 children. So you've got to treat them with that kind of respect and equal respect. So yes, to answer your question, we expecting a new album. Yes, 2 songs have been released, and another 9 songs. People out there can really expect these songs in the next 4 to 5 to 6 months.
It's about the music, the traditional culture, the social nitty-gritty, the storytelling style, and the drive to live true. All this to repurpose the music from merely entertaining the audience to engaging with the audience. That's Somersault, and I couldn't agree more. Kit Kupar Shangpliang, Gregory Nongrum. Thank you, gentlemen. Whether you recorded in a photograph or a studio, there are certainly no limits to artistic expression. And when it's done for a purpose that's far beyond and above all earthly rules, it just gets sweeter. Anubhav Deka, Menti Jamir, and Somersault's Kit Kupar Shangpliang, Gregory Ford Nongrum. What a delight. You're watching Showtime. I'm Aaron Lyngdoh. I shall see you next Sunday. Until then, goodbye.